Laurie and Deb talked to me in this episode about a serious crash that Laurie had on his motorbike after he had a stroke, which saw him end up in intensive care with multiple injuries, including a significant brain injury. It's the most astounding story, one with so many twists and turns. Just a quick warning here, there is a mention of suicide in this conversation. You will be amazed at what God does. We shouldn't be amazed, but we are. Enjoy.
Laurie and Deb, welcome to Revival on Air today. So we're at Carricklinga Camp.
Yeah.
You've been here a few times?
Yeah,
three times. Yeah. But you're not from around here, you're...
No, we're from
New South Wales, Tumbalong.
near Gundagai.
Gundagai?
Yeah, near Gundagai.
There's a famous song about Gundagai.
The fable's quite different, but anyway.
So I hear that you nearly lost your life in a motorbike accident.
Yeah, about 12 years ago.
Okay. How long have you been in the Lord now? How long have...
38.
1987 we came along.
Yep.
1985 I received the Spirit.
Oh, no, you do the maths, I don't. I'm no good at that.
So that's what, 38 years ago-ish?
Thereabouts,
38 years ago.
Yeah.
So 12 years ago, what happened?
I got a job in patient transport in Wagga Base Hospital, which is transporting patients from hospital to hospital or hospital to any tests that they need, nuclear medicine or whatever. So I was doing that. I've done that for 15 years. Just one day, like Deb and I were on the ball sort of thing. Like I'd just ring up Deb and say, look, I'm leaving home. And I used to ride a motorbike because I got a new motorbike. And I used to...
So motorbike was it? She dirt bike or a road bike?
It's both, but it was a dirt bike, but it was a 690 KTM.
Right, so like an adventure bike type thing. Yeah.
And I used to ride the back way home because it was quicker for me.
I know what that means.
Yes, so it had a lot of corners and I used to love it. And I'd take the so-called easy way on the freeway when it was dark because there was a lot of kangaroos on the back roads. So, and a lot of the time I would take the main road because I used to work 18 hours a day plus.
Sometimes.
It was 10 hours, that was my work. But you could be called up, like I could be coming back from a place and then they'd say, oh, look, we need you to go to Griffith or whatever. Well, that's another 4 hours.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? That's without stopping and picking up patients and everything. So 18 hours plus.
That was when they had bad drug runs. Laurie was part of the mental health team and part of the A team. So
because I used to...
he could calm the addicts down. So
right.
so
when you say bad drug runs, it's like you'd have a batch of drugs.
Whatever was being processed and sent through the Riverina.
Because I used to be a drug dealer and everything. I knew if there was a bad batch, there'd be a bad batch in Griffiths as well and over here because the dealers are all linked, basically.
And so you basically end up with a whole bunch of people in hospital.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, okay.
Oh, yes.
And he said, I'm on the way home. And Laurie was always clockwork, so I kind of thought, yeah, okay, and we had a routine. So the routine was I would cook dinner and then he'd feed the animals and we'd have tea together. And I was 45 minutes from home too at this particular time. My work, I was a sales rep. He rang me. I thought, good, he'll be home about the same time as me, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I got home and he hadn't arrived. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just cook tea. And so I cooked tea. And then I fed the animals and I'm thinking, he's still not home. And that was really peculiar. But I had this overwhelming sense of grief within me. And so I sat on...
Isn't that weird?
Oh, this. I just knew.
Yeah.
I knew. And I just said, Lord, just look after my husband. And from there, I had decided to ring my daughter. And I said, Lauren, I think Dad's had an accident. And she said, why, Mum? And I said, well, he's not home. And I said, I'm going to go the highway to see if I can find Dad. Would you mind going the back way to see if Dad's there? She said, not a problem, Mum. And anyway, so I'm about 3/4 of the way to Wagga. All I did was pray all the way. I just prayed in tongues all the way. And next thing I get this phone call, get yourself to the Wagga Base Hospital, Mum. Dad's in a really bad way. And it was really good in a sense because instead of panicking, it was like the Lord had put this bubble around me. Oh, my goodness. It was just a peace that passes understanding. I get myself to the hospital. I was met by the pastor. And he said, Deb, you know, it's not good. Laurie's hooked up to life support. It's not good. And I just burst through the door. There was nothing going to stop me. I was like a hurricane. So what ended up happening was I walked in there and they're all trying to keep me away, and Laurie was hooked up to life support. And they had told me that he had 1% chance of survival. In other words, we're taking him upstairs to palliative and just get all your family and friends to come in and say their goodbyes. And I thought to myself, I just stopped and I just said to the Lord, I said, Lord, you know I own a farm and you know this farm's too big for me to run. I said, I want you to bring my husband back fully. I said, otherwise take him, because this is not a good life for us. And I sort of really held on to that. And the pastor's trying to tell me to, sort of took the information of the mind, you know, of the natural mind, and saying, but Deb, prepare yourself for this other thing. And I said, no, God is going to heal this man. And anyway, even the doctor then came to me and he said, Debbie, get real, you know, like, come on, get real. And I said, no, this man is going to be healed. And anyway, so by this time, everybody was coming in to say their goodbyes. And
so what were his injuries? What were your injuries?
Injuries.
Well, I had a stroke, and the stroke was in the middle of my brain.
So is that what caused the accident, or?
No, actually, you should.
Well, after I rung Debbie, I remember halfway going along riding on my bike sort of thing, and then I don't remember anything, but I know details because I looked at my helmet afterwards and I saw there's white dust on it.
Yeah.
So I've hit a cockatoo.
Right.
On my visor.
Yeah, right.
And that gave me the stroke.
Right.
I was going to have a stroke.
So did your visor break, or is it?
No.
Just that blunt force trauma.
Yeah,
right.
And I was going to have a stroke anyway, apparently, and that brought it on. And I want to tell the story that there was a husband and wife coming the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And they saw me hit the bird and have the accident.
Yeah.
This road never has.
This road has
nobody coming along.
Nobody on it. Praise the Lord.
These people came.
And these people come along just at the right time. And he looked after me while the lady knew a nurse that lived up the road. And the nurse was home.
Yeah.
That was...
Yeah, what are the chances?
What a blessing that the nurse was home. She come down, look after me till the ambulance got there, and like 40 minutes from Wagga,
So his injuries were, the bleed was right in the middle, so about that big.
So on in the top
Right
part of
on
the brain.
top.
Yeah.
So there was no way could they operate. And if they had have operated, they would have killed him anyway. He had frontal lobal damage from the impact, hitting the road or whatever he hit. His back was broken.
Twice.
Right.
And
whereabouts?
Twice.
The lower
part
of the back, yeah.
But he also had his rotator cuff was stuffed as well. But yeah, the bleed was that big that it was taking him out. His brain, he was very brain damaged. Like his brain was mush pretty much.
But looking at me, you wouldn't think anything was wrong because I had everything long.
Yeah, all he had was this little to look at. He looked good. He just had a little mark here, little black eye sort of thing. But he was going to die. So what ended up happening then was we're all going through, and by this stage, the people within our fellowship, which was only about 5 or 6 of us there, we all had the same opinion as I had. God was going to heal him. So I had this wonderful team of support, which was wonderful. And anyway, as everybody was coming in to say their goodbyes, I kept saying, no, he's going to be healed. And some were just sort of, like, get real, Deb, But I had a good support team, which was wonderful. And it reminded me of when the Lord had cast out the people, the disbelievers. It was kind of a moment like that for me. But anyway, not that I had any judgment on anybody that felt that way. I just knew what I wanted. And so one of our brothers came in, Bede, and he said to me, hey, Debs, how about we anoint Laurie with oil? And I went, yeah, okay. I said, go for it.
James chapter 5, verse 16. Yeah, it talks about that.
Amen. And anyway, so Bede had anointed Laurie with oil, and even though Laurie was hooked up to life support, he smiled. And it was a big, beautiful smile. He doesn't know, but that was kind of like a sign for me. It was like, yep, okay. And Bede saw it. We were really happy. But a miracle took place. The bleed on his brain had stopped. And the doctors then, because he was hooked up, they could see what was going on. And they just said, 10% now, Debs,
So that was like immediately after?
Immediately, as soon as he was anointed with the oil. Well, within moments later. So they said, that gives us a couple of options now, Deb. And they said, we can take him to Sydney. There's 2 hospitals available, one St Vincent's and the other was Westmead or something like that. And I didn't want him to go to Westmead. I wanted him to go to St Vincent's because I knew they were better equipped. So I'd already knew that. And they were going to air fly him down. And I wanted to go. I just had to go. And they just looked at me, the team, because they had to take a team. And they said, you can't go, you're too heavy. We've got a weight restriction and you're going to be too heavy. I said, I'm going to hang on to the wheels. I don't care, I'm going. I said, I'll hang on to the wings if I have to. But I had no money. I had nothing. I had my work clothes and I had an empty handbag. Hadn't been paid. I wasn't going to be paid for a fortnight. And next thing they're going, no, you're too heavy. I said, well, then weigh me. And so they weighed me and I was right. I was the right weight. And so next thing, I probably got a bit heavier after this bit, but the pastor's wife emptied the contents of her handbag into my handbag. And then another lady emptied her contents into my handbag. So I had some money and stuff at least. And so we ended up on the emergency flight down to Sydney. And it was 2012 when, during the gay Mardi Gras, so there wasn't much accommodation around that area, being the King's Cross area. And also there was the time when the big floods and everything had come through. So there was big floods and storm activity. Anyway, the team, they were meant to work around Laurie on the plane, but I sat down at the end of where Laurie was laying and I just prayed all the way. And at the end, the nurses, the doctors didn't even have to go near him. And they had just remarked what a wonderful flight that had been, considering the conditions. So that was a miracle. But the worst thing was we ended up getting there by ambulance very quickly and they took him straight up to the ICU and they wouldn't let me in because in that area there's probably about 6 or 7 patients and they've got a team working around keeping these guys and girls alive and there's no room for an extra body. So I got very upset, very, very upset about that, and I have to wait in this little waiting room until for 5 minutes I could probably go in after they've cleaned him up or done something. And I remember praying and saying to the Lord, this isn't good enough. I need to be with my husband. Anyway, the brothers and sisters around the Sydney Fellowship had rung me and said, hey, Debs, you've got a place to stay if you like. And I just did not want that. If I wanted to grieve, I wanted to grieve. If I wanted to scream, I wanted to scream. If I wanted to cry, I wanted to cry. I just wanted to be near my husband. And so a social worker came down and saw me. And she said to me, hey, Deb, after introducing me, she said, you can stop at this place for one night. The gay Mardi Gras is on. There's no accommodation anywhere. And it was a little place that was put aside for people like myself, whose parents or children or loved ones were going through huge surgeries or operations or recoveries, accommodation where they could stay and come up and then spend time with. Anyway, that was a real blessing, but it was only for one night. And it was I just had to walk out the front door of the hospital down a hill and that was it. I was there. And anyway, so I had one night and that was great. And I remember just praying to the Lord, I need to get in and have access to my husband. And I went back to the hospital and the social workers grabbed me straight away and they said, oh, Deb, don't know where you're going to stop tonight. And I thought, well, I'm just going to bum around the hospital. I'm just going to drink their coffee, eat their food and lay on the lounge. That's what I'm going to do. So I went to see the social workers to pay for this one night that I had. And next thing the phone rang while I was sitting there. And the lady said to me after the phone call, she said, hey, Deb, somebody's just cancelled down at that place and you can have this place for 31 nights if you like. But the stipulation is you have to pay for this right away. And I'm thinking, I don't have that sort of money, And anyway, I looked into my bank account and unbeknownst to me, my boss, he'd put 4 weeks leave in my bank account. And I didn't even have to redeem that. I still had another 4 weeks. Yeah. And a small fellowship had heard of our plight and they poured their tithe bag into my account too. How they got those, I don't know. And the amount of money that little fellowship had put into my bank account paid for the accommodation for the 31 nights. And anyway, I go back and I'm really, really happy because I can see all these wonderful little things happening. And I get to the ICU and they let me in, which was amazing. And they said to me, this was a couple of days after that actually, they said to me, when I was in there, Laurie was he wasn't a good patient. He was very agitated, even though he was unconscious. He was moving a lot and, he was just not a very good patient. And every time I was in there, he would calm down so they could work nicely. So then I had permission to come in the whole time if I wanted to. But from there, we fought a lot of battles, like with the Lord. Laurie was life and death, life and death, life and death, life and death. And there was a brother that used to come up all the way from Gosford. He would hop on the train and he would come up from Gosford just to support me. And he would bring me food and he would support me in prayer and everything like that.
It's not a small trip.
That's a big
Many
trip.
hours, yeah.
There's this brother who was just beautiful. And I had a support team where I could send back messages, little things that were happening. But for the majority of people that were coming in, they were just all very negative. That Laurie, what was going to go on. And I just kept sticking to that, no, he's going to be fine. But anyway, what ended up happening was this one particular day we were there and this bloke was with me and my son was with me on this particular day and we were in visiting Laurie and there was this infection that was running. You could see it running through his veins and it was etching closer and closer to his heart.
What do you mean you could see it?
And it was kind of like, you know how you have translucent skin? Yeah, and you can see sometimes the veins.
Yeah,
You could see this red.
All right.
Running like it wasn't fast, but it was approaching. And the doctors actually had said to me that day, they said, look, Laurie's got a really bad infection. If this reaches his heart, that's probably good night, Irene. And I just lost it. I got really emotional. And my son just grabbed me like this. He said, Mum, you've prayed to God to heal. Dad will be healed. And that was all I needed to hear to bring my mind back. And anyway, and so Tevita and I prayed and Richard prayed over Dad and it stopped.
Of course it did.
It stopped. It was gone. But I can remember being really drained from that experience. So I went back to my little room and I just said, Lord, show me what I need, some concrete, show me. And anyway, I opened up the Bible that I had to Psalm 145. And I hope you don't mind me describing this in layman's terms. But the first part of it was, it talks about letting God, everybody know about what God does in your life. Tell your children's children, tell everybody. And I said to the Lord, Lord, I can do that. You know I do that. I can do that easily. And the second part of that, it talks about giving you your heart's desire. And I said, Lord, you know my heart's desire. I want my husband back fully. And so me and this man used to go out every lunchtime out into the streets, witnessing to whatever moved. And we did that. And so I thought, I'm saying to the Lord, yep, doing it, Lord. But I would have done it anyway. It wasn't really.
But because that scripture was just shown to you right there and then.
This is what I needed to do, yeah.
And here you are telling it 12 years later.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing 12 years later.
Anyway, what ended up happening is Laurie, they decided he got to a point that they were going to take him out of his coma. And they finally brought him out, but he wasn't acting to stimuli, which was really, really, I thought, oh no, paraplegic. And I'm thinking, terrible thing.
So physical stimuli or?
Well, you know, where they put the bricks and that in his foot. And so we prayed about that. Next thing, his feet started moving. And sort of Laurie then came to conscious a bit, but his cognitive functions were very, very basic. Not even basic, they were less than basic. And that was really difficult, so that the team was trying to decide where to put him, whether they were going to put him, because his heart and everything was good, so all his vitals were great, but he was what they called a moron. He was a moron.
Right.
That
was the term they used.
That was the term they used,
And do you remember any of this, Laurie? No.
I don't remember anything.
So they said to me, Deb, well, we're just trying to decide whether to put him in the brain unit or in the stroke unit. And they ended up deciding the stroke unit was the best because obviously he'd had a stroke. And they put him in this room that had about 4 or 5 other patients. And I just didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. Actually, I hated it. I wanted privacy. I wanted just me and my husband. I went away and I had some more prayer that night and I just said, Lord, can you fix this? And I didn't know how the Lord was going to fix that. But what ended up happening was I went back to the hospital that morning and they said, oh, we've moved. I couldn't find him. He wasn't in the room. And I'm like, oh, where is he, you know? And then a nurse came to me and she said, oh, we've just moved him into a private room. He had a little bug in his stool and we don't want him giving that to everybody else. And I'm like, oh. Anyway, I went in there and that was the case. And I sort of did most of the nursing then. I sort of decided to take Laurie into the showers and all that type of thing. And Laurie still had no idea. I was just wheeling him from there into there and doing things. Luckily, he kind of liked me, so that was good. And I said to them a couple of days later, I said, oh, does he still have the bug? And they said, oh, no, he doesn't, but we're going to leave him here. We're going to leave him here. But we were on workers' comp, so, and another miracle was when Laurie had the accident, it was a couple of days before they changed the law, which the law was then that
To and from work.
was covered,
Were covered.
but then 2 days later it wasn't. So we just
Cancelled it.
So we scraped in.
Really?
We scraped in, yeah. So that was a blessing. And anyway, so Laurie started to recover a little bit, but his cognitive function was really, really bad. And I remember Pastor Andrew from Sydney coming in one day to have some prayer with Laurie and myself. And Laurie just he just had no idea of anything. And I remember he just sort of did this wee in front of Pastor Andrew, like not thinking anything of it. And I was shocked. I was just absolutely shocked. I'm like, I can't believe you just did that. And I got into Laurie, and he's like a little boy. He didn't even know who I was. And I remember just so frustrated and walking out. And I went back down to my little room where I was, and I just prayed. I said, Lord, I just want him to know who I am.
Anyway, I don't know where it was during the night or whatever. I was looking up at the roof, and I thought, that's a hospital. What am I doing in a hospital? That was my first recollection.
Right. And this was like after that prayer you had that day.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm getting out of here. There's nothing wrong with me. Hello? Like, what am I doing here?
Because obviously physically you were okay. Like all your limbs were working fine.
Well, not really. But
I couldn't.
Not really. But
That was my thought. I'm getting out of here. So I just ripped open the blankets and went to get out of bed. Couldn't walk, could I? I just collapsed on the bed and on the floor. Hit my head again, and nurses pushed the emergency button, and everyone come running and put me back to bed, and like patched me up again. And anyway, the next day, Debbie comes walking into the room. Oh, g'day, Debbie, how you going?
Yeah, right. That's awesome.
Why am I here? What's going on? Like that was my first recollection. I didn't know why I was there. I didn't know.
You didn't know we had a
I didn't
motorbike
know I
accident?
even had an accident.
And so how long after the accident?
that's probably week 2. And anyway, they started doing more cognitive testing on him, and he still wasn't scoring very high, but he was doing a little bit better. And I could play euchre with him. He knew how to play euchre and stuff like that. But I can remember they're going, oh, he's scoring so low. And I said, look, I didn't marry a brain. I married a good looker. And they just didn't have a sense of humour. So so things started to get a lot better. But he was still agitated, and he just did not get it that he could not get out of that bed. And so they hired some agency nurses for us. And
Because I wanted to get out of bed. Hospital's not my...
Yeah.
I hate hospitals.
And so they would spend the big money to have these agency nurses there looking after him through the night. So we took it on board to just witness to these agency nurses, and that was good fun, wasn't it? Even though Laurie really didn't know what was going on.
I was just agreeing.
He was just, just being happy because he was happy. He knew who I was. But he didn't know anybody else. He didn't know anyone that came in to visit.
Didn't know my son.
He didn't know his children.
Well, you didn't pray for him. You didn't know those people. You only prayed for him. Seriously, you need to get your prayer right.
I know. I should have. Oh, gosh, what was I thinking?
But that in itself's amazing, isn't it? Right?
Yeah,
that God answered your prayer.
Oh, instantly.
Right, that desire of your heart.
Yeah.
So specifically.
Circumstance.
I love it. That's so cool.
So what ended up happening then was it got to the point where I started to get a little bit mentally ill. And they were going to send us home to Wagga because Laurie was a star at Wagga. They all loved him at Wagga Base because that's where he worked. He didn't just do that. He worked in the operating theatres and done other things as well. So he was well known by surgeons and everything and quite loved. And so they wanted him back. But then the doctor put a hand on Laurie's leg and he had...
Blood clot.
DVT.
A big DVT.
Yeah.
And they just said, Wagga Base... Well, what happened was they put him on warfarin and things like that. And there was no way that they had to give Laurie elephant doses because he metabolises medications very quickly and it just wasn't going to cut the mustard. So they had to give him huge doses. And then Wagga Base just said, no, we can't take anyone in rehab that's got a drip. I was like, I was sort of over it by this stage. I needed to get home. This was getting up to day 20 or something like that. Yeah. I just like, And they told me how dangerous the situation was. Like, I only had to touch him and he would bleed because he just was on so much medication to try and get this thing away. And just a sideline to that, later on, as we got back to Gundagai later on, he only had 2 INRs done, and they take a blood test to detect whether how high the dose of warfarin has to be weekly. Now, his blood levels went back to normal and he never had to go on the tablets again, and that never happens. That was a miracle. But that's a sideline, just in case I forget later on. That was just a wonderful miracle. It got to the point that I just had enough. And they had a meeting and they decided to send Laurie and I back by patient transport. But
the irony.
Yeah, they just said, it's about time. We'll take him with a drip. And just for my mental health, I think it was for.
Because no airplane would take us anyway.
Yeah, it was too expensive. I think we'd used enough money and we used enough government money, I think. So they thought they'd send us, by that way. But they said to me, look, Deb, you have to stay with Laurie tonight. We're not paying any more agency nurses. And I said, yeah, fine. So 3 o'clock, I didn't sleep at all. And by about 3 o'clock that morning, I went to have a shower. And I came back from that shower and I looked at my engagement ring and my diamond was gone. And that crushed me more than anything because it symbolised our marriage, there's my diamond gone. Like, what does that mean, Lord, Anyway, I went over to Laurie and I'm crying and he said, what's wrong, sweetie, what's wrong? And I said, I've lost the diamond in my ring. And Laurie wouldn't even know, but he just said, look, just go over and look in that corner over there. And that corner over there was probably about 4 metres away. So how he could see.
He's the corner of the room.
Corner of the room in the hospital, yeah. There was my little diamond on the ground. Yes. So I was able to collect that diamond into a specimen jar and take it home with me, and have ring repaired later on. Actually, Laurie, at that stage, he was walking moderately with the help of a Jimmy belt. It's kind of like a belt that velcros around them.
Velcros around.
With handles.
With handles, so people can
help him.
Okay, yeah.
So, but he looked like he was skinny as, very malnutrition looking, and he had eyes like a stunned possum. So he didn't look very good at all. But anyway, that was the condition he was in. And they finally got us back to rehab in Wagga. And so what happened?
I used to walk along a rail once every 2 days.
Yeah.
And to me, that just didn't cut the mustard. I wanted to learn how to walk again. And I said to him, look, I need to do this. I don't care, like 3 or 4 times a day so I can get used. No, I can't do that. I can only do it once every 2 days. And I could do it a couple of times and that was it. I said, just take it slow. I don't want to go slow. I want to walk, I want get everything back because the nurses wanted to wash me and bath me and do everything. And I'd say, no, I can do it myself. Like, hello, I could.
I mean, when you have a farm and others, I guess we're used to, right? You're a self-sufficient person, right? It's not just...
So...
you fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, eventually we faced a panel of doctors and nurses and stuff. And I just said, look, it's just not treat me. I want to get back to work. I want to do this. I want to do that. And just take your time. So anyway.
They let me take him home, but under strict instruction that he wasn't to be on his own at any time, that I had to pretty much do everything for him. And he had to join a rehab program to get back to work. Anyway, so it was Easter time. There was an Easter camp on up at Talbingo.
And I went up to Easter camp. Debbie wanted me to go in a wheelchair and I wouldn't go in a wheelchair. They had to Jimmy me belt me up because there's stairs and all sorts of stuff.
And everyone was elated because all of Australia was praying for Laurie at this time. And he walks in. I took him outside and put him under a tree.
People would come up to greet me and obviously they were people that I knew. I didn't have a clue who they were. That really upset me. How you going, Laurie? Remember me? Oh, yeah. Well, I had no idea. And that really...
caused depression.
Caused a bit of depression on me because, I couldn't remember anyone.
And I can remember the nurses saying to me, Deb, save your strength. You're going to need it when you get him home. And I'm thinking, what are they on about? I'm so happy my husband's getting better. It was a fight. It was a fight from day one for probably up to 5 years at this stage, a fight.
I remember that brother-in-law was at Debbie in Sydney. He come down to look after me while Debbie went back to work.
I had to go back to work, yeah.
And I'd get him to Jimmy belt me all the way up to our mailbox. It's 500-600 metres. Mightn't sound much, but...
No, that's a lot.
And I used to walk up and down 5 times a day, so he used to come with me every day.
And this man actually had stomach cancer.
I didn't realise.
It's the love of a brother, unbelievable.
And once I could walk by myself, it took me 2 or 3 weeks or whatever to get by myself. I used to just walk up and down as much as I could, up and down them. And then once I could do that, I said to Deb, right,
We're walking up the hill every day.
we're walking up the hill. Our hill's
Steep.
steep with slate and all sorts. We just got a track up there, like. And I said, Deb,
Track like the goats at North.
Yeah. And he was beating me up there.
and
So physically, Laurie was doing well. And just as a sideline, just to sort of get on with this a bit, he had no deficits from his accident. We went and had him checked out after we'll get on with that bit of the testimony in a minute, but from his brain, there was no scarring, no dead tissue, no nothing. His rotator cuff was healed. His back was healed. There's no evidence of anything that had ever happened to him. But psychologically, Laurie was a mess. Psychologically. 5 years had gone by. By this time, Laurie was back at work, doing a full-time job and everything else. But secretly, Laurie wasn't doing too well.
I'd do my trip to wherever I had to go, patient transport. And then when I realised that I had half an hour, I'd go to the back of our van and lay in the back of a stretcher. And I'd rest or sleep or whatever. And I'd set the alarm or someone would come in and wake me up. But yeah, so...
And why was that? Because the
was
work
just
exhausted you?
Yeah, exhausted, yeah.
Brain injury.
And I had a good team around me of patient transport. They knew what I was like beforehand, and they could see that I was a bit tired and needed a bit, so they let me go and do whatever I had to do, and that meant sleep. I'd done that for a while, and then
And you at home and
I was at home, and
the things you couldn't do.
There's a lot of stuff that I couldn't. You can hit me with a pin or whatever, I couldn't feel it.
Right. Where? Like what parts of your body?
Everywhere.
Right.
You could pick up a log of fire and he couldn't feel it.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't taste. Debbie'd make a lovely meal and say, that was lovely. Oh, yeah, that was lovely. But
It was cardboard.
I couldn't taste it.
He had no feeling for hunger.
I couldn't taste, I couldn't feel, I couldn't do a lot of stuff.
And there was no intimacy. He couldn't feel. He couldn't, nothing.
So did the doctors know this, or is this something you guys sort of kept to yourself?
Well, I didn't even know because he was being a hero.
I just thought it'd come back, you know. Anyway, it come to a point where I put a fire up the top, got some limbs and stuff, like after the storm, there was a whole heap of trees and stuff come down. So I just put them all together and lit the fire. And one night, and it was in winter, so it was fine. Anyway, I went to roll over a log and didn't realise that log was on fire. You know, like had coals on it, you know what I mean, like red hot coals. And I moved it and looked up and I thought, oh no, you know, I could see it was burnt. I couldn't feel it. You know, this is it, that's it. Like depression and everything just went into one. So no, that's it, I'm gonna do myself in. So I went to Debbie. I had to go inside to get the key to the car. And I said, Debbie, just know that I love you.
So what did you need the key to the car for?
I was going to drive up to a lookout, do myself in.
And I knew that when he'd said that to me, I knew what it meant. And at that stage, I was exhausted. I mean, I'd been going through this trial for a very long time and there was nothing more I could do. Because Laurie was concealing a lot of things to me, I really did not know how he was. He was acting like the happy man, but he wasn't the happy man. He couldn't help it. It's through brain injury that because he didn't know all of our brothers and sisters, they stopped coming around because Laurie was really matter-of-fact and angry all the time. So really it was a battle between me and Laurie, and it was just a conversation between me and the Lord all those years. And I can remember thinking to myself, I can't let Laurie see me being upset. I can't let him see that because he used to sit there and yell orders at me and nobody could help, but I was Superwoman. I could do everything. In Laurie's eyes, I was Superwoman and I could do everything. And I kept trying to encourage Laurie to look to the Lord because I was looking to the Lord. I was doing the lion's share of all of that. And poor Laurie, he just couldn't see to do that. And I can remember going up to the chook shed and I used to think to myself, oh, I used to boot the rooster. I used to kick the rooster. I was so cranky.
You're a nasty rooster anyway.
Well, well, no wonder, you know, after I had beat him around a bit. But anyway, and I can remember because there were 3 occasions that I wanted to leave Laurie during that period because I just couldn't take it any longer. But because he didn't know his children, he didn't know anyone. The children were left by this time, so it was just Laurie and I. And the fellowship was praying for us, but we had no relationships because I couldn't leave Laurie. I had to be there most of the time. And I remember saying to the Lord, this voice was going off in my head just saying, it's not his fault, Debbie. And I'm thinking, I've got no exit plan, Lord. I said, but you haven't promised this to me. This is not what you have promised me. And I can remember coming back from every one of those sessions, and honestly, sometimes there were 5 or 6 of those sessions every day, you know. And I can remember coming back and thinking...
So 5 or 6 of the sessions where you went to the chook
Where I'd go to the chook shed,
kick the rooster.
Oh, or just go up there because he couldn't see me because he was very protective and very everything. He was, it was so hard. And I can remember I'd come back from that and I'd get like a little grain of rice, like a miracle that was a grain of rice within his attitude. And I can remember after quite a period of time, that grain of rice had turned into a mountain and I was able to get to the top. That's what life was really like. And then Laurie comes in and he says to me, just know I love you, and grabbed the keys and went. And it was winter and it was cold, and I remember getting in the fetal position beside our wood heater and just saying to the Lord, Lord, just prepare me for what I might find. Because I was exhausted. I couldn't stop him. There was nothing I could do. There was not one thing I could put in play to stop this event. And so I rang the pastor and I said to the pastor, I said, oh, this is what's happening. He said, look, Debbie, you need to ring the authorities. And my way of thinking, and I know this might be wrong, and I'm sorry for anyone that might be listening to this, whether this be the wrong advice or the right advice, but my mind was, look, if I'm going to find him dead, there's nothing we can do. He's going to be dead. But if he somehow doesn't, and that's what I was hoping, then he doesn't have to carry that stigmatism around the small town that was the man that tried to kill himself. That was my thought. So I spun that story to my pastor and he said, okay, Debbie, I support you in that, but I want you to ring me every hour. And if there comes a certain hour, like midnight, we will ring the authorities. And I went, okay. So me and the pastor, we just prayed and prayed and prayed by phone. I'd ring up every hour. I'd say, no, he's not back yet. And it got to the 12th hour. And he said, come on, Deb, we've got to ring the police now. And I said, look, I think I know where he is. And I actually walked up to where this fire was, and there was Laurie standing.
I went up to the lookout to do myself in, and I was just about to do it. And I just had a thought come over me, and it was obviously the Lord or whatever. I said, no, you can't. But I'm here. I'm going to do it. No, you can't. All right. So I thought for a bit and then went back home. Went up to the fire. I said, well, Lord, you're going to have to fix me because, not just fix my hands now, but fix everything that's wrong with me because I can't handle this. And Debbie came up and I said to Debbie, look, I'm not going to do it again.
And that was all I needed to hear. And I knew it was heartfelt. I knew he wouldn't go back on his promise. Yeah.
And it was a time where we were prayer and fasting. It was a Friday night. A Saturday, Sunday, we prayer and fasted. And my prayer and fast was I wanted to be fixed. Yeah. And Deb and me. And
there was only 4 of us that knew what was going on, so the rest of the fellowship had no idea. But we were all supported in that, yeah. And come the Monday.
And I got another motorbike that I get around in the paddocks with. And I went over to the paddock over across the road to feed my cattle. And because I was just going from paddock to paddock, I didn't wear my helmet. I didn't, it's just what farmers do, I suppose. What I did anyway.
No, that's what a lot of farmers do. I hung around a lot of farms. That's how it works.
Fed my cattle and then come back to the first gate before the highway sort of thing and then cross the highway to my other place, to my house. And come to the first gate and open up the gate and push the bike through. And I noticed I was getting a flat tyre. So I hurried up and shut the gate, jumped on the bike and looking across the freeway sort of thing. And there was a truck coming, but he had enough time for me to beat him. So I went across and then there was a car. It was flying. So I had to put on my brake to stop and I put on the back brake, which is the flat tyre. and over I went on the cement on the middle of the highway.
Yeah.
On the middle. I went over and knocked myself out again.
So the bike flipped over.
Yeah.
Did it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you smacked you on the ground. Yeah, of course.
Over.
Yeah.
And knocked myself out for 10, 15 minutes. I woke back up and I thought, I was getting across the road, that's right. Yeah, so I jumped up and there was cars going past. I didn't stop.
It stopped.
No stopping.
So this is a dual lane highway.
It's a Hume highway, so the
It's a Hume, right. Right.
And
So the gap in the middle is reasonably wide.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so maybe people didn't see you.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what we think.
because
Yeah.
there was grass and stuff, you know, it would have been too late.
And they would have been
They would have been
flying
flying
past,
110,
yeah.
20, whatever. So I thought, I'll have to get the bike off the road. So I went to pick up my bike and I busted my shoulder, broke my shoulder. And because on the first accident I had my left shoulder, this is my right shoulder, and went to pick it up, couldn't pick it up. So I had to use my left hand, and because it's weaker, because I busted it was weaker, but I got the bike up and I put the stand on it down and rested over for a bit because that knocked me up just to pick it up. And still, there was cars going past, they didn't worry about me because I suppose the bike's up and
You're up.
I was up, I was resting over it. But I thought, well, I'm going to have to push the bike over there because I can't start it.
Yeah.
So I, because it kick start, not a electric start. And so I waited for enough room and got across the road with the bike and landed up on the gate and walked home. I'm walking into the back of the house, and
I couldn't see Laurie at this stage, but I got up in
Embarrassing.
dinner time, where have you been, da-da-da-da. And then I looked and his face was the size of a football. It was swollen. Right. The next thing I noticed was I could see the bones in his hand. He gloved his hand. And his knee was like all exposed.
Because of course you're not wearing any leathers.
And you know what, like...
the shorts and...
just far,
But what was amazing was he started barking orders at me, and they were very precise and very, very right, exactly what I needed to do. He said to me, you need to do this, don't take me to Gundagai Hospital because they can't fix me there, you've got to take me to Wagga. And so I did all that. I had this superhuman power and I got him all together. And the first thought to me was, Lord, like, he hasn't spoke to me like that in 5-6 years. Everything was mumble jumble.
Oh, right. So it's the preciseness and the clarity of his instruction.
Clarity.
Yeah.
And so I got him in the car. We got to the hospital. They wheeled him in and took him straight up to the operating theatres.
Before you go in the operating, you got to cleaned up or whatever you got to do, you know. And I used to be an ORA, and I said to the ORA, I said, look, I want this, this, and this, and I don't want to feel anything. So you're going to have to knock me out, you know, like put me under anaesthetic and everything so I can't feel anything, you know. He said, how do you know? Because I used to do this, all right? So, because there's a new ORA that
What's ORA stand for?
operating room assistant.
Right.
So he done it all and he explained to the doctor, and I knew the doctor sort of thing. And he said, don't worry, I'm going to look after you. It's all good.
And at this stage, Laurie didn't really know anybody. He sort of had a lot of short-term memory, yeah.
And come to the, what do you call it? After the operation.
Oh, yeah, went the recovery room.
Recovery, and I was starving. And let alone to me.
And you hadn't had an appetite.
I haven't had I couldn't taste anything, I couldn't feel anything, didn't have an appetite. And this time I was starving. And not that I'd realised it, but I was starving. So I said to the nurse,
angry starving.
I said, look, I'm hungry. Can I have something? I said, no, you can't. I said, why not? The doctor hasn't said it. He hasn't cleared you yet. I said, well, ring the doctor and ask him whether I can have something to eat. Oh, we will when we get time. I said, ask him now.
You were hungry.
He was.
Angry.
It's angry.
Hungry.
And I said, righto. So they got on the phone. I knew the doctor, and he said, give him whatever he wants and give them some medications too, if you like. So they organised, they rang up the kitchen, and the kitchen said, you realise that we are chockers, over chockers, and there's nothing.
There's no food.
And she came back and said, sorry, Laurie, there's nothing. But they had this one little bit of cake, just
Dried up old cake that's in a
dried
plastic
up
bag.
old cake in a packet, like packet cake. And it's not something that you like, but they said, that's all we've got. I said, give it here. And I opened up and had it, and it was the best thing I've ever tasted. I could taste it. And that just, that was good, And then the brother that anointed me with oil, he come in, like I'd met him beforehand. After I had my accident, I didn't recognise him. Yeah. He come in and said, oh, how you going, Pete? How's your son and your daughter? And everything come back to me.
What? Wow.
And when they give me needles and that, I could feel it. Everything come back. So praise the Lord.
Wow, that's amazing.
But it was after that he then started to develop his relationship with the Lord again also. And, yeah.
This is not, we're not advocating for people not wearing helmets though, are we?
No. And I don't say the Lord caused the accidents either. The Lord gave us the ways out.
Yeah.
I don't believe at all that the Lord causes accidents. No. I just believe that's part of being human, as it rains on the good and the bad. But he certainly, everything we asked, he gave.
Like Debbie says, like, if she could have hit me and fixed me rather than...
Yeah, actually funny, I sort of said to her...
Probably better we use the motorbike example.
I just said to everyone, I said, Lord, you could have just put a big cross on his head and I could have, But yeah,
Swapped him one. Yeah.
Praise the Lord, that was
so
massive.
Good.
But that healing did take a long time. I think it's really overcoming. It's really endurance. It's really being in tune with prayer because, if I had have just been a natural person, I'm sure Laurie would have been dead. And I'm sure that, who knows. But, Lord, he was so faithful. But in saying that also, before Laurie when he first came to the Lord and even before, he was a strong young man and did kind of my surmise of Laurie was he had such ability that he didn't need the Lord. But after the accident, what's changed, Tony?
Need the Lord for everything.
Yeah. We see it time and time again. And all the people I've spoken to about their testimony, that point where we get to where our natural ability is done, or our ability to work it out in our mind how to solve the problem we just realise we can't. And the Lord just steps in there, right? He steps in the impossible. He steps in when the doctors say, no, we can't do anything more.
Yeah.
He steps in when we go, Lord, I just don't know how to do this. It's over to you. I just got to give it over to you. That's where he shines through. Because that's where his glory, glory shines the brightest. That's it.
Amen. And you know how I did make that sideline where all the deficits were gone. And the only reason we had discovered that was because after the second accident, he had to go in for follow-ups. And I'd asked the doctor and one of the physios on one of the particular days, I actually said to them, I said, oh, what about blah, 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 these other injuries? And they said, your husband doesn't have any deficits, even to the point where we were sent to a neurosurgeon, not surgeon, but whatever they
Neurologist,
to put a brain cap and everything on him. And I asked, did they find any scarring on that? And there was no scarring whatsoever. And he said that I said, well, what are the chances of Laurie having another stroke? And he said, 1%. He said his brain is as good as anybody else's.
I see.
Yeah. So in a way, it was hard to convince Laurie of that, but once he started praying, he was convinced.
Yeah.
And it's been...
And here you are.
Yeah, praise God, And on top of that also, I can just remember just a funny little couple of sidelines too. In Vanity, while I was in hospital with my hair going grey in Sydney, I went down and I witnessed to a hairdresser. And the hairdresser said, you come down every day and talk to me and I'll do your hair for free. So the Lord kind of took care of everything. It was so good.
So good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to meet you today and hear that, because that's just wonderful. So wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, wasn't that wonderful? It's actually really hard when you meet them to realise that Laurie had actually gone through that, because there is no signs of that today. They've got so many other stories to share. We recorded for a couple of hours, so we might even release some of their other amazing miracles that have happened to them in future episodes. If you want to know more about how God can heal you, how he can change your life, how he can turn you from wherever you are today completely around and have a life with him, then reach out to us at podcast@revivalontheairtoday.com or connect to us via DM on any of the social channels.